Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her core resources at natashahelfer.com. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so care for yourself accordingly. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Autocrate.
Hello and welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. I'm Natasha Helfer. On this podcast, we try to basically attack shame in any way we can: education, stories, research, professionals, personal accounts, all the things. So that's what we're about here. And I'm super excited to have our guest, who is Kelly Trust. She's an ex-Mormon bodybuilder and a mom of an amazing 4-year-old kiddo. And she has a great story that I'm excited to dive into. She currently does sports massage and enjoys building herself up, in the whole bodybuilder space. But she graduated from Brigham Young University in athletic training. And that's what we're here to talk about mostly, because her journey and I think my journey have some similarities in that we were disciplined while we were at Brigham Young University. And I do like to just kind of frame this. So we were adult women entering adult education, and both of us were disciplined at an adult school that is federally funded by our national government that is not supposed to discriminate. And this is all due to having consensual sex as adult women with, I'm guessing, our boyfriends and things. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And so that is an issue that happens fairly often for a lot of different reasons. This happens to LGBTQ folks all the time. It happens to heterosexual members as well. And the classic kind of idea that I hear from a lot of people is, well, you signed the honor code, you knew what you were getting into, you should have known better. If you wanted to have sex at college, you could have done that at any other university. So these are kind of the pushbacks that we typically get, but we're going to dive into why that doesn't really, it's not really a great argument, especially when you're dealing with people who, even if they have the best of intentions or have the best of ideas, things happen, life happens, life is about mistakes. And not that I think having sex premaritally is a mistake anymore, but even if you think that at the time, you can have a certain value system and still make mistakes and have different ideas. Plus, you're in an emerging adulthood developmental stage, which is actually very normal to be exploring these things and to be curious about these things, and for them to have like zero leeway and to have it interfere with your academics and your career, I think is something that needs to be looked at more closely as to why we even allow these things, especially if they do have federally funded monies going to these universities. So that's my little quip right before we get started. But welcome to the show, Kelly.
Nice. Hi. Thank you for having me. I am excited, and I've kind of followed your journey for, the similar reasons, that because my trauma was a lot of sexual trauma, sexual shame, that sort of thing, that when I hear that you are leaving the church because you're teaching how to cope with this stuff, I was like, no, sorry. But I needed you when I was a kid. I needed somebody who could tell me that I was okay for who I was. But I didn't have that my entire life. I mean, and I want to backtrack, because I think my parents have a hard time when I say nobody told me that. They told me that they loved me. They told me about things that they wanted for me. And I think because I knew that I wasn't going to fit into those categories one day, or right now, I didn't feel like I fit into that in some way. I was like, I'm ultimately going to disappoint my parents and end up separate from them. So I'm going to do everything I can not to do that. That was what my brain did. And the wall that it built up was, of course, I never want to be separate from my family. And there's enough of a part of me that wants to be here that I'm willing to do the crazy things that kept me there. But all along, what I viewed as love I look back now and I say, well, that wasn't actually love, that was control. And
Mm.
so for me, and it's hard because I have a lens of, yes, we did have good times as kids. And then I have this lens of, I didn't fit in my family. I was always a black sheep. I felt like I was always getting in trouble for something in my family or blamed for something. And so eventually getting to a point of going back and looking at it through a different lens, I say, okay, that wasn't love. I know what I expect out of love now and what my boundaries are on that now. But the first time I was really told that I was okay for who I was 17.
Mm.
That's really hard for a
Yeah.
kid to grow up thinking I'm not lovable. Like that's kind of what I thought because my siblings, when they would see me doing something wrong, and this goes this goes back because I was born not 100% physically female. And by that, I mean I everything looked female on the outside, but I didn't have an actual hole for the vaginal opening. It was just skin across. And so when I was born, they were kind of like, is she actually a girl? Is it, what are the parts on the inside? I don't know, because sometimes phenotypes, genotype, all this stuff can get confused, right? But they said, we'll let her mature. We'll see how she is, how those organs grow. And then we'll see, do we need to do corrective surgeries? Or is that not even a needed tube for her? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. But my mom couldn't really explain that to a kid. She just said, you need a hole so you can have babies. That's what she said. And she tried to explain it in her best way. But for me, it looked like I wasn't female enough, I guess, is kind of how I felt my whole life. And then I knew I didn't identify with my brother. I was like, no, that's not my life. But my sisters are also kind of, I'm not all that way either. I was just kind of this in between. And I didn't even know how to talk about having a gender identity crisis when you grow up a Mormon child. Because
Yeah.
if I have boobs and long hair, I'm a girl. You know what I mean? And if I can potentially have babies, I'm a girl. That to them, that's it. There's A and B, you know? And the more I learn now, and honestly, the more I learn about science and the fact that we have thousands of chromosomes that cross over that can make us as much female or male as our body comes out when we're born. That's it. That's who we are. That's what we're given. And sometimes it doesn't look like that on the outside. And people who don't understand that don't even know how to process that. So that's why I kind of try and explain it that way, is that I felt that way my whole life, but I didn't know how to explain it in those words. So I also didn't know how to tell my parents, you're not getting it, because they were trying to get it. They were trying to see me as a young female who was trying to figure out her sexuality, and they were just trying to say, I don't want my daughter to get pregnant with STDs, so let me try and control this thing. And we're growing up in a Mormon world, so if I'm more sexually free or trying to figure out, test those boundaries more as a female, shame, 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 right? Like walking down the streets Game of Thrones style, right? That's what it felt like. I don't know if you've seen that, but or seen that scene, but it's like, oh, if you admit to having some sort of sin, it the community around you is going to see it. Either you're not going to be taking the sacrament in our religion, right? Which is a very public event that you do every single Sunday. And if someone happens to be watching and it passes by you or whatever reason, they're going to be like, oh, what'd she do? What did that person do that has them not being able to have the privilege of taking the sacrament and renewing their covenants with God weekly? Which to me, I look back on and I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't.
Well, and
But
even if nobody's watching,
yes,
I remember feeling like everybody was watching, right? It's a very
exactly.
shameful space to be in, even if only one person noticed or
And
whatever.
even if it's just your sibling who's sitting next to you who
Yeah.
passes it to you, and you have to say, I can't, and they go, oh, why?
Or
Because
your
they're
mom or dad.
or who, yes, exactly. Which
Right. Yeah. This is why there really isn't confidentiality when
there
these
isn't
things are being
confidentiality.
noticed.
So
Hmm.
when they said, oh, we fixed it, your mom and dad could come in there now, I go,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, effort, sure. No, but that's not the right answer. Try again. You know what I mean? And people are like, well, but they're changing things. I'm like, no, they're putting band-aids on a trauma wound. And this needs surgical help. We need to go in there and get out all of the infection and then go in and see if we can repair things in a good direction. If you're actually trying to help people, if you're actually trying to bring them to a place where they can feel whole again, because that's the whole point, is feeling like a whole individual, not broken, not like you're betraying some system that exists inside of you. Anyway.
Yeah. So just to clarify for those who are listening who may not understand all of these things. So Kelly's talking about worthiness interviews that happen in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where if you do something that's considered sinful, you are expected to go and talk to the bishop and confess, do a confession in a sense. This is somewhat similar to the Catholic faith. And except for it's just an office. There's no there's no barrier.
You're just sitting in a room.
Yeah, so you just sit in a room.
Dude, yeah, who's probably your friend's dad.
Yeah. So somebody from the congregation, because we don't have professional clergy either, and so somebody who's been called to that position they're usually called for about 4 to 5 years. And this is a very, there's a power differential there, of course, because like you mentioned, this is usually an older man. And when you're doing this as a preteen or a teenager or even an emerging adult, the age difference is usually going to be quite significant, right? And so anyway, so that's what Kelly is talking about. And another thing I wanted to just mention, because you're talking about your family, I think this is one of the challenging things, right? It's that yes and. It's like, yes, we can love our families. Yes, they have loved us. Yes, in many ways, many of us have had good upbringings. It's not like maybe we were physically abused or, there was necessarily so, and there were maybe aspects of our childhood that were very dear and wonderful. And when we go through faith transitions and have different perspectives, you can look back and go, wow, a lot of the ways that I was raised was fairly, rigid or inflexible, or there were standards and expectations that now that I see myself a little bit past that are very difficult for me to understand how that impacted me, right? As a kid and as an emerging sexual being and going through developmental phases. So yes, all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what your Mormon background was and where your family was on all that?
So my dad is a very very, very smart man. I'll start with that. He's very smart. So for me, this is kind of hard because that was the first thing when I left the church, is I was like, but wait, my dad's smart. Why? What? Like that was a big thing for me. I was like, why is he staying there? I'm sorry, this is hard just because this is my family and they're everything to me. And with it being the holidays, I think I'm a little bit, the nerve is raw, but that's okay. So shake it off for a second here so I can tell my story. So my dad was called to be a mission president when I was 4 years old in Paraguay. He's always been a very powerful man, very well known in the community. And he was my best friend, honestly, for a long time. And I didn't really understand why. I always seemed to be the black sheep in my family, but more recently I've gone and I've just said, you know what? I'm asking questions. I'm asking my family. I'm asking everybody. I want to know what it was that I did that was so terrible to be where I am now, which is pretty much ostracized from them. Which again, why it's raw during the holidays. I'm using a t-shirt as a rag here, but anyway, so we're gonna get to this part. So I'm gonna try and go back to this. My dad was called to be a mission president. I was 4. I loved it. We got to go live in a different country. I got to be a little sister to about 200 dudes, okay? And it was awesome because they were all my best friend, and I was just this little cute girl who, at the time, there weren't really rules about physical touch with missionaries and mission president's family. Now there are a lot of them, just because, people make mistakes and then we have to have rules, and that's okay. And everybody has bad days where they make a mistake and then we have to make a rule, and it's okay because rules are usually there to protect, okay? But anyway, back then I used to get piggyback rides from these guys, and I would sit on their lap and they would read me stories, and we would go play in the backyard when they were having a bad day. Honestly, my mom would say, let's bring them into the family home, the mission home, and let's just give them a family day. They're having a bad day out there. Let's bring them in. So my childhood, though, was be a perfect representative of the church as a daughter, as a mission president's daughter, as a representative of someone coming from a wealthy family where my dad was going to retire and go be a mission, or sorry, he was going to be a seminary teacher out in Utah. That's what he wanted to do. And the church kind of caught wind, and they're like, oh, hey, we could use you as a mission president. Then the economy crashes. He has to go back to work, all this stuff. He never ends up becoming a seminary teacher. But that wasn't until after we got back from Paraguay. We moved into a house in Provo. My dad worked at the church office building, helped translate the Book of Mormon into Spanish more efficiently. So they were just kind of like, look, there's things in here that the message doesn't line up. Can you go through and figure out where the grammar parts are? And he helped a lot with footnotes and cross referencing, like all these things during that year that I remember hearing about and thinking, oh, my dad really cares about this church and he's really trying hard to further this organization. And then he decides he needs to go back to work, and we moved into a house in Sandy, Utah, in a neighborhood called Pepperwood that some people have heard of because there's a lot of either external authorities or wealthy members of the community in Utah that live in this neighborhood. Okay. The owner of Larry H. Miller Cars, and that's like every car dealership in Utah kind of thing. There's across the street from us, we have an emeritus 70. Next to us, we have the lead scientist for New Skin. Then we have the CEO of New Skin, Truman Hunt, who lives down the road. Then we have, Hoops Vision. That guy's my neighbor, like literally like our backyards line up to each other. So my dad moves into this neighborhood. He makes friends with all of these people now too. And he's just further ingrained into this community where he has only benefited from being in the church. And I talk a lot about my father because he was very much a director of the way that my life was supposed to go, because he preached and preached in the home about how he was our steward. He was in charge of us, and his stewardship was not complete until we're underneath someone else's protection. So, for example, a husband. And once we were in the care of a different priesthood holder, he let the reins off a lot, but it's funny because once I got divorced, I remember he mentioned something about how his stewardship was back. And I was like, nah, okay, we're going to talk about that later. But like, he's somebody who I think he truly believes in the goodness of the gospel. But he has to, because 30 years ago, which I'm 30 years old. So when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad made a really big mistake that this person's come and talked to me 30 years later saying this ruined my life. And then I approach my dad and I say, did this happen? And the answer in a lot of ways has been, yeah, this did happen. And then I got to be a living reminder of this mistake that my mom tried to forget about for 30 years. And I got to be an awesome living reminder of that. And I have this sexual trauma, which for me, I was the only one of her kids that was born C-section that had any complications during pregnancy. And I have this sexual trauma, this from birth. Like, for me, there's coincidence, and then there's things that happened to me that I couldn't control. And I've processed a lot of this, which is why I can talk about it. It's still hard. to talk about sometimes, but to then be treated like I was the one who was wrong and bad and needed to be fixed my entire life by my parents, and that that's how I felt, and that I voiced that to them so many times about how I just wanted to understand more. And then I get the information and I figure out that it's not because I was born broken, but because I was born into a setting that was very tumultuous, and that there was no trust, or um or a lot of broken trust maybe, and a lot of stories I've heard from family since then that has showed me that I just kind of was at the wrong place at the wrong time in the terms of when I was born. And that's okay now because I can see it. But like I said, going back on my early childhood, I think, okay, there's a lot of things that are unraveling. It was almost like that was pulling a little string from a rug, and now the whole rug is undone. And so I'm trying to organize things again, you know? Um, anyway, so this father who encourages me my whole life to follow this system that he believes can save him, because ultimately that's what it has to be at this point. Because I go, oh, he he apparently went to, and this is the story that I heard, that there was no actual criminal proceedings or retaliation, not retaliation, or punishment by the church. What am I looking for?
Like no disciplinary action.
Disciplinary action. That's the word I'm looking for, by the church. I was like, there's a word that we use in this place, because it wasn't punishable by law because there was no actual penetration in any of these instances.
Mm.
So that was the answer that my dad was given by that bishop at the time, that said, hey, you're good, basically. Like, go repent, whatever. And, you know, and now go be a mission president, and now go do all of these things and be this leader in this community who's preaching about sexual purity and forcing it on your kids all day. Thank you for projecting, Father. I see it now, but I couldn't see it back then. Back then, I thought I was a problem. And I thought that if I didn't walk perfectly in line with every single thing that the church said, that I was a bad daughter and a bad Mormon and a bad woman and a failure of a human, and that I didn't belong with God.
Yeah. Okay. So you're born with some type of intersex presentation, it sounds like. You're also born into a family which is, the parents are dealing with their own issues, right? It sounds like, and even some pretty serious issues that they're trying to manage as you're being born, which is probably true for all of us at some level, but it sounds like there were some like added stressors that were pretty serious that your mom and dad were dealing with at the time. And then how they deal with that in the long run is to kind of double down. The church, in essence, gives them a second chance, right? Gives your dad a second chance, doesn't report him to authorities, which is a whole nother, that's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother dumpster fire. We'll just scoot that
Yeah,
one.
that's really, and so you're growing up in this,
Yeah.
both the community, which is also sexually very rigid as far as the expectations are really that you're just not sexual at all, even with arousal until you're married, and of course heterosexually only. And then you've got this family stuff that's contributing to that as well. And this is the landscape, I guess, in your life as you enter college aged,
Yes.
Kelly. Is that fair? So tell us
Exactly.
about
So
going
yeah.
to BYU and how you made that decision. Was it even a decision? Was that, there's a lot of people who are like, well, this is the only place my parents will pay for, or
That one, yeah, my parents wanted to pay for it because, of course, as you know, that it is subsidized via tithing. And the amount of money that my father has given over to the church, I don't want to know. I really don't want to know, honestly, because I think I might vomit. So, of course, he wants to pay for BYU. And he told me my whole life, we went to BYU. Then my brother did. Then my other sister did. Then my other sister did. Who's up to bat next? Me. And then I have a younger sister who also went to BYU. So like it was a family thing. Was there a choice? Sure, if I wanted to pay for it.
Right.
dad was taking care of me my entire life and not taught me any financial principles in a real sense on how to save. I mean, if we got A's at the end of the semester, he would give us $50 per A. And then if we kept it in the bank of dad, he would double it and give it to us at the end of high school. So he did teach us a little bit about saving, but I mean, I ended up walking into college with like 2 grand from that. Not like I had a ton, but it was enough to just be like, okay, I can buy stuff for my apartment. I can do stuff like I can be an adult kind of thing. But then my dad paid for school, and then he paid for my apartment, and he paid for my car, and he paid for everything else. So I don't think he realized how much he was crippling me in terms of knowing how to take care of myself. I think I was always very smart and aware of what was going on, and I hit the button on paying the bills at least, but he was providing the funds. And and then I got married, and that transferred over different. And so I just, for a long time, I did, that was a thing that anyway, sorry. Again, that's another podcast, is, having a woman not understand her financial world. But yes, he says, I'll pay for it. You go to BYU. My 2 older sisters had both gone through the athletic training program, the sports medicine program. And if you don't know much about that program, a lot of your time is spent on lower campus. So we're not up with the business students, the nursing, all of that stuff. Those people are on upper campus. They're up the stairs. Down here, we have the Smith Field House. You have the student athlete building and the RB. Okay. That's where a lot of my classes were. That's where all of my friends hung out. And then there's an athletic training room there. And over the course of a semester, you'll spend about 200 hours in those areas or at practice or whatever it is. And usually you end up going over in hours because you're a student athletic trainer. You're pretty much a glorified water girl at that point, and you're a slave to the athletic system at BYU. So I'm already going into this system knowing some athletes because of my sisters. And there was a couple of people that, since I was there during the summer semester, that's when a lot of the athletes come and they do summer training. So like the incoming class of football players go to school during that summer semester so that they can also be doing practices and everything, so that when the school year starts, they're getting in line with the whole team and it's a little bit better transition, right? So those incoming freshmen, me too that year, there's an athlete building, and then there's a few other student buildings that are full over in oh goodness, the student housing that's across from
Was it Helaman Halls
Helaman
or?
Halls.
Yeah,
Helaman Halls. I'm like, I haven't thought about that in so long, but yes, Helaman Halls. So I was in
that's
one of
where I
those
stayed
halls.
too. So
Right. Right. So I'm at BYU. I'm meeting these people. I am already kind of I guess at this point, I'm more of a rebellious teenager type person at this point. And so I fall in with the athletes very easily because those people love, 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 love to hang out with other people who they consider are more chill, more laid back Mormons, not quite so uptight. There was this stupid phrase that I remember because we were kids, and it's just like, wait, are they chill or are they going to say so? Like that was a phrase, was, are they chill? And I was like, that's weird. Looking back now, I'm like, that's a little childish, but it was more so just like
a lot of these athletes are not Latter-day Saint themselves. Is that correct?
yeah.
Yes.
And the one that I got closer to wasn't LDS. And this is kind of a well-known story now because of Instagram and everything, but Jamal Williams is the player. He was very well-known, running back there, and I fell in with him and his friends, and me and my roommates would go and hang out with them, and it was really, really fun. And one night, me and him slept together, and as a growing Mormon girl who's trying really hard to be good, I hit a point where I felt a load of shame in my soul because I had been, because you go to church and you hear over and over again about how these are the things that you need to address with your bishop. And it's just this this is a constant thing that's reiterated. And especially when you're in college, oh my goodness, all of those lessons are on chastity. And so it's like all of the things of how to be sexually pure. And if you're getting that in your brain so many times and you are trying to believe in this thing that you've been told is true your entire life, I felt a bucket load of shame. I go in, I talk to my bishop, I say, hey, this happened. And he said, wait, what was that name again? Okay, maybe we need to go talk to the honor code office about this, because who knows about this? Okay. And he starts asking me questions like that. And I go, okay, so you're saying I need to go talk to the honor code office about this. And he said, yes, in order to complete your repentance process, that's going to be part of it, is that you're going and you're making things right with the honor code too. Because as you previously stated, the honor code at BYU says there is no premarital sex. There's no premarital sexual relations of any sort. And really, growing up, to me, I was told anything beyond kissing that would bring sexual arousal is bad. That qualifies. Then anything past that, you're screwed, right? So anyway,
But somehow kissing doesn't bring about sexual arousal, and thinking about kissing doesn't bring about sexual arousal.
that's why I was like, like for me, I was like, okay, literally anything beyond that, and I'm like, what? Yeah, for that. So that's kind of how my brain organized it, and so anyway, so I go in, I talk to my bishop. He says, you need to go to the honor code office, right? I say, okay, I get that, whatever. I get in front of Dean Hepri, who's the dean of students, and he's asking me these questions because he's like, wait, it's this person who's a football player, and he was already doing very well in the program, and so they're like, we don't want to get rid of this kid. Like, that was essentially it, is we brought this kid over from California, we want to keep him here to play. What do we do?
How do they face the dilemma of their hypocrisy, basically, right? Like,
Exactly.
you're expendable, but
yes,
the football player will not.
so they're
Right.
asking me all these questions about exactly what happened. And one of the last questions that Dean Hepri asked me was, well, but do you know if Jamal is circumcised? And I'm like,
What?
why are you asking me this question? I was like, it was really dark.
I think this is actually a first, Kelly. I don't usually hear firsts, but I think you're shocking me with a first.
Because I was shocked sitting. Was I 18 yet? I think I was 18. And I'm sitting there in a room alone with the dean of students, where he's asking me if the person I slept with, who's a BYU football student player, asking me if he was circumcised or not, which, mind you, after I went on John's podcast and shared that, because I went on John DeLynne's podcast, I had two other people who told me Dean Hepri asked them that question in interviews.
That is so, what does that have to do with anything? Do you have any idea?
At first, I thought, is he trying to figure out if I've actually seen this guy's parts or not? Like, is he trying to, like, are you trying to confirm something? Did you also go and ask him this question and you want to make sure those ones still line up? Like, I had no idea, really, because because at the time I said, I don't know, also, like, I don't really understand why that's something we need to talk about right here. And he was like, yeah, anyway, you know what, we'll get back to you and you have a nice day. Like, he closed the conversation then. Wow. When I didn't really respond. So now, through a little bit more mature lenses, I think there's some, like, that's a test that he's trying to see, is this person going to fold and give me all this information that I'm looking for and give me all the dirty details, or is she going to put up a wall like she should as a normal person with red flags and turn me down? And I think, like, I don't know anything about this man beyond the fact that he was insanely he crossed way too many lines in his interview in the questions that he asked me. And that one alone is like, what are you talking about here? You're the dean of students at a school that, like you said, is federally funded, that the NCAA supports. And you have the dean of students asking about one of their football players' private parts. Mm-hmm. And that's okay? Mm-hmm. No, that's not okay.
No,
but anyway.
Okay. No, it's not.
It's not okay.
No,
it's not okay. And it makes me feel like he didn't believe me, honestly, as I was like, are you trying to like I just sat here and told you this whole story about what happened, and you're still trying to like confirm things, or what is going on? And I didn't know. And I asked my mom and dad later because I was like, hey, this question, not pertinent, but he totally asked it. So what's the deal with that? And my mom and dad were like, well, yeah, they were probably just trying to figure out if it was like true or not, if you'd actually been with it. Like they filed it away too, because their mental gymnastics has to pull them away from the obvious, which is this dude maybe has a kink for that. I don't know. Like that's what I'm saying, is this dude is now verbally asking something to me, who's a student there as well, mind you. There's just so many like aspects of this that I was like, that wasn't okay, but I didn't know how to, like, who do you go to? You can go to President Worthen and say, no, like he's just going to be like, hi, have a good day. You were just suspended for a violation, so I'm not going to listen to you.
Right. You're the problem, right? Not
I'm
them.
the problem. I'm the culprit.
I do just want to pause and just say very clearly from a mental health perspective that this behavior is emotionally, spiritually, and sexually abusive to ask these kinds of questions. And how the Latter-day Saint population is still in 2023 seeing this kind of behavior as normative or part of the normal repentance process is just astounding to me. So this is really very poor boundaries, but it's more than that. It's abusive behavior. I just want to pause and say that for a minute. And I also want to thank you for, yeah, well, and I want to thank you too for the vulnerability that you've shown so far. I mean, I know I didn't want to interrupt your emotions and things, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or bad, or that you're taking up too much time or anything. Like, whatever you're bringing to the table here is welcome. So
yeah, thank you for that. I have strangely found through this, because at first I was told you're not really allowed to talk about this, like not allowed to. I didn't have to sign anything that said I wouldn't talk about it, but they were just like, look, this matter is going to be put to rest and we're going to continue forward. But continuing forward was that I was suspended for a year from BYU and Jamal was not. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, tell me how that makes sense. But then I stopped and I said, okay, is it because he's not Mormon and I am? Because that's what my father ended up saying was, well, I don't have enough information, but based on what I have, they still could have made the right decision. So now I have my father further iterating that this is all okay and that this all should happen this way, and that I just need to do my time, basically.
Let's talk about this for a minute. Why does your father even know that this is happening?
Oh, because
this is a whole nother level of adult sexuality, right? That when these things happen, when you get kicked out of your university, I'm guessing you need to tell your parents. And so now your parents know about your adult sex life, right? This is a whole nother issue that happens in our community.
And my entire family as well.
Which is none of their business, right? Your adult sexual life is none of your father's and family's business. But this is what happens when
it has been my entire childhood. That's the problem, is my sexual life has been my parents' business my entire life.
Yeah.
So the programming in me to be able to go as an 18-year-old girl and say, hey, for lack of a better way to say it, I done effed up and I'm here to talk to you about why I'm here and whatever. And I'm also trying to take responsibility for my actions, kind of thing. So I'm trying really hard to be like, okay, take a humble pie, slice of humble pie here. Let's just sit in this, and maybe sitting in these feelings is your punishment, Kelly. Like, I justified all of these people saying that this was okay and not doing anything about it either. Mind you, like now it hurts me so much because my father, I thought he was my protector. So now when I go back and I see these things that have happened to me over the years, where my dad sided with the church, is what he did, is he sided with the greater image of the church and what it would look like if they removed a female student and kept a male student because he played football. Like, that doesn't look good for them. And he doesn't want anything to do with that. And he doesn't want to be related to that or anything either. So he's going to try and figure out why BYU made the right decision, not why Kelly's hurting, not why she feels like her family's not there for her, you know? So even now, if I bring it up, he's like, haven't we talked about this one? And sometimes I'm like, well, I still haven't gotten the validation from my father that I thought I would get. So it still hurts if we bring it up, you know? But they are true blue BYU football fans till the day they die. So that's another thing too, is being in the athletic training program, I was down around football and track and volleyball and everything. And I get put with all these different teams. And my senior season, I get put with in-season football for Jamal's final season of BYU football too. And so then I had to go through this whole program where I'm spending every single practice, every single game, all of my weekends, all this stuff with this person in this program. That it was very, very difficult. Like I told the head athletic trainer there, I said, I don't want you to put me with running backs. Like we get assigned to a position for the whole year this is your job. You get to be put in charge. And I just said, I don't care where you put me. Don't put me with running backs. The end. Thank you. So he ended up putting me actually with quarterbacks and tight ends. So it was Tanner Mangum and Taysom Hill that I'm following around the field the whole time trying to chase it. But of course, offense, they all work together. So there's times where I'm just out. And honestly, by that point, Jamal and I didn't have hard feelings for each other because we had kind of talked about how it was a really messed up situation all around. And that he realized that I wasn't trying to get him in trouble, that I was trying to do stuff for me, and that he was but he was upset at first. He thought I was trying to rat him out and trying to get him kicked out of his system. So we didn't talk for a long time, and it was actually bad vibes. But
this is a whole other thing, right? Is you can't go in as an individual and just confess your own sin, right? They will always ask
another party.
Who did you do this with? So that that other person, whether they want to come in and confess or not, this is a whole nother boundary breach. Because
then they're calling up Jamal, hey, I need you to come into the dean's office to talk about if he slept with this girl. And he's like, I'm an 18-year-old kid. Actually, he was a little bit younger. He was 17 at the time. So now he's still a minor. Although I don't know how that works with going to school if they get some sort of, I don't know how that legality works. But as far as I know, a grown man asking a 17-year-old about this situation isn't okay either. Like, but you're right. It crosses so many boundaries. There's so many things that are a violation.
Whether it was a BYU football player or not, why does that other person not get their own autonomy and agency for when and if they want to confess? I mean, the only time that they should be asking those kinds of questions is if it's a mandated reporter type of concern, right? And
I wasn't coming in there saying that he assaulted me.
No,
that was not the story that I was telling my bishop. I said, look, this happened. I got to a point where I feel like and that wasn't the only thing, but also that was like the big thing that I was going there talking to him for. But, a couple other guys, random things. And usually they're like, is there anything else? Like, get it all out kind of thing. And mind you, I had one bishop at BYU who was basically, tell me from the start, had me go through my entire sexual history. That one was uncomfortable. I was in there for like 3 hours crying my eyes out to this bishop because I came in for some other small, like I was trying to talk to him and be like, hey, this is weighing on my soul, this sort of thing. But I had this pattern in my head of once your guilt gets to a certain point or your mom and dad find out about it or whatever, because that's usually what it was, is your mom and dad caught you doing something. Oh, I need you to go talk to the bishop. Like, it's just this pattern that's created in my soul. And then I become this person who's not under my parents' care anymore. And I don't know what else to do except to go to my bishop with this stuff. It's just
right. And no, it's baked in, right? It's baked into the process.
Layers.
And because I can imagine.
Why did you go at all? And I'm like, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do in order to live with my parents in the next life.
Exactly. That's right. So somebody like Jamal, who isn't LDS, who doesn't come from our culture, would probably see this as like, why in the heck did you go and say anything, right? But then for us, it's there's no other option. I mean, the all-knowing God knows anyway, right?
He
So
knows.
so so if the all-knowing God knows and you have to put yourself right with God, this is the only avenue that we've been told is the way to do that. It's an incredibly profound indoctrination that happens that doesn't you don't see any other way out. There's no other way to be right with God. There's no other way to be right with yourself. Like you're saying, the guilt and the feelings, I mean, it all starts adding up. It causes mental health symptoms, right? Like anxiety and depression and, worry and guilt and sleeplessness and, all these things. And so that's how we're supposed to get right.
Yes.
And that's why the whole system is set up to support, and as you talk about your father, that's confirmation bias, which I hope people understand what that means, but that it's very difficult to go against the grind. You're going to look for ways that you can stay connected to the main thing you believe. And so that's what your father was doing. And then even with this thing about years later, well, why are we still talking about this? This is also a very common thing that happens in Latter-day Saint homes and other conservative homes. It's like, we don't want to look at the thing that's causing conflict or sadness. We want to sweep it under the rug so we can pretend all is well, right? All is well, all is well. Instead of actually saying, if this is still coming up for my daughter, what is unresolved here? Something is unresolved. I wonder if we could, tend to
That question doesn't, it stops there for my father. He says it's unresolved, but then he says, oh, that's probably something she needs to work on. And his brain goes elsewhere. Like it doesn't, I don't think it goes past the point of, let me sit here and really think about a different perspective on this, or let me go ask, because I know my sisters agree with me, let me go ask one of them, because it didn't happen to them. It just doesn't ever, when I speak with them, I never hear the words that I want to hear, which I do for my mom, but she kind of gets like shoved to the side when my dad says, well, I don't know. Because my mom goes, no, that was wrong, and he shouldn't have asked you those things, and this was clearly like they treated that one wrong, Kelly. Like she'll say that, and then my dad will say, well, I don't know, and my mom's like, well, yeah, I mean, we don't know, but and it's that one's hard too. And then the idea of let's sweep this under the rug and let's just keep it there because that's a place where I don't have to look at it. That is the most common practice in this church is let's just sweep it under the rug. Let's stamp out the sexual thoughts. Let's stamp out the idea of wanting to have a drink of alcohol. Let's just stamp it out. Let's just not think about it. Let's cover it with a hymn. Those are the techniques that they teach you in order to heal your sexual side, okay, or your bad sexual thoughts. Not let me sit here and figure out who you are and what happened to you and why you're coming to me in this vulnerable state and sharing this very important information with me that I have no idea how to handle because I'm not a sexual therapist.
Well, and so let's just talk about that for a minute, right? So here's emerging adults and adolescents who are coming to leadership type folks, mentors in a way, which is what the bishops are and the Relief Society presidents and all that. And they're confessing, they're saying something that's difficult that's happened. They feel badly about it. And what are they getting in return? Like you're saying, are they getting advice? Are they getting mental health knowledge? Are they getting sexuality education? No, they're getting discipline. They're getting discipline, and they're getting even more questions about that, elicit shame and elicit guilt. And then they get put on this repentance process, which again starts with punishment, because you get something withdrawn, your ability to be a member or to participate as a member or whatever those things are. So when you think about what we know about what people need in times of distress, which is usually acceptance, love, resources, conversation, community, we actually take away all of that. We take away community, we take away support, we get into this punitive mode. And then when we complain about it, like, hey, this is hurting me, or hey, this isn't working for me, then it's just the community responds by saying, But you were supposed to know that you were going to get punished. Like the punishment is part of the deal. Why are you complaining about that?
You brought this on yourself. Therefore, if you're sad about it, there's just something wrong with you and you need to go
Right.
change your attitude.
Instead of thinking, maybe as a system, we could do this better.
Maybe this isn't the path. Maybe if we're doing this over and over and over again and getting the same result, which is nothing being solved, that's not the right way to go.
Yeah. Well, and also I think a lot of people, I mean, some people like your father who get disciplined will because of guilt or whatever will double down, but a lot of other people will leave and we lose them forever as well. So it's just either way, it's not a healthy approach. The double downed members are not really healthy for the system. And then of course, if we lose members, that's not healthy for the system either, right? So it might be healthy for the individual who's leaving at the time, but it's not healthy for the system.
But for the system that you're trying to say works, it's clearly not working. And that's the other thing too, is of course you grow up thinking this is just me, right? But then you say you've had similar experiences. And then after I go on John's podcast and I talk about getting disciplinary action based on athlete involvement, the stories I got after then, I was like, okay, no joke. Probably 5,500 messages from people who either had similar stories there or they just grew up with sexual shame in the church in general or this, but it was like, okay, so not just me. Okay, also, I'm not a professional. This is a lot of weight because I now feel not empowered to make change, but I feel the urge to go and help make change here because I have all this information and I can't sit on it. It does not sit well within my soul to not do something about this. But then you try and approach the system, nothing. Okay. You're going to get absolutely no help if you try and say, here's a big problem to the church. They're going to say, what problem?
Yeah.
Sam Young, this is so weird that he moved into my childhood home when we moved to Paraguay. Sam was in my ward there and he moved into the home that I grew up in. So then I hear he comes out and he's saying all these things and I was like, okay, well, did my dad happen to be in a ward where there was a lot of stuff maybe? Because I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this was just a bad area. That can happen too, because Sam wouldn't have been brought that information if it wasn't coming from the community around him first, because that's what happens because was he bishop? I don't remember. Was he bishop for a second?
He was a bishop, yes.
Okay, right. Of that ward that I grew up in. So I'm like, what knowledge has been passed down that's got this so bad that Sam at least feels, I need to start going up the line and I need to start asking more questions and bigger questions, because it usually starts right here, what's in front of your face. And mind you, the bishop that I had when I was down in that same ward before, because when I was 17, the first time I ever got told that I was loved and okay as I am was after my parents found out I had sex with my high school boyfriend a few times. It's not like it was a crazy thing. It's not like I was constantly, not the point. Looking back, I was a normal teenager. Okay?
Right. Because even as you're trying to minimize that, I'm like, there's no need to minimize that. That's normal behavior.
Normal behavior, but for my teenage mind, I was doing something wrong, right? Absolutely. And my parents thought it was severely wrong and that I was headed down a terrible path. So they took me out of school mid-semester, in the springtime, moved me to Utah from Texas to live with my sister in Utah, go to a different school, be away from all of those people in that environment, because my bishop had me convinced that I was addicted to sex.
Oh my goodness grief.
So then my parents put me in therapy with a sex addiction therapist in Utah, because that was a thing, even though that's
that's still a thing.
Is it still a thing out there? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a huge thing.
Okay, so anyway, not the point. Again, dumpster fire, we can move to the side for a minute, because that's another big problem, is telling a 17-year-old girl that wanting to have sex with her high school boyfriend is a sexual addiction just completely just tanks every single bit of hope and desire for wanting to have pleasure later on in life.
Mm.
That's literally what it was for me. It was like, there's no up, down, right, good, bad. It's an addiction. I have to completely stay away from it altogether. Okay, like, how do I get unaddicted from this? Mom, dad, help. Like, but it's because my bishop told me, if you are still doing these things, you clearly are addicted.
Oh my gosh, this is so harmful. I just can't. So then they disrupt your entire high school.
I was a junior in high school. They pull me out. I spend the last part of my junior year at Orem High School living with my sister. And of course, people are like, why did you move up here mid-semester? Well, my parents found out that I was fucking my boyfriend. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's what it was for me at the time. And that was all I could, excuse my language, but that was like, for me as a kid, I was like, I don't know, I got in trouble. They brought me up here and I'm trying to fix things. But it feels like this was just what my life was constantly surrounded by, was these sexual issues. And I was like, what, these aren't, like, now I look back and I'm like, these weren't issues. It was just me trying to mature as a woman who has every right to her own pleasure and her own body and her own sexual identity. And it's being controlled like a puppet from her parents and this bishop and anybody else who decides to grab the reins on it, I guess. Dean Hepry at the point that he did too. It's like, guys, come on, leave me alone. And I couldn't until I really left. And that was, you know, that's a whole thing later. But at the time when I was at BYU, there's all these strings that are attached that are controlling what I'm doing. And I still made those decisions for myself, but I can at least go back and figure out why, you know, because looking back, I think I didn't want to go in and sit across from a man and tell him all of these things about my sexual life. I didn't want to.
Of course. All right, we have some comments from a listener. Kelly Nichols is saying, perfect example of putting an organization or church above people. Thank you for sharing. So much trauma and shame. I say this all the time. The system is broken. And she continues to say, as you were just talking, so sad. I'm so sick of the church treating normal sexual behaviors as sins, addictions, etc. It's so damaging and affects your whole life. I will say here at the Natasha Helfer podcast, you can use any language you want. We see all language as therapeutic and helpful, including swearing. And there's actually research to support that. So it's part of righteous anger. It's part of humor. It's part of righteous anger. It's part of a lot of things of why we use colorful language. So that's perfectly fine. Okay, so so you have all these experiences. You're kind of developing as a normal teenage emerging adult person. You're sexually curious, you have sexual desire, that's all normal. You're having some experiences with people of your choice consensually. They're consensual as well, but then either family, parents, bishops, leaders, they're all giving you a lot of information that is actually scientifically inaccurate, which, by the way, I always try to say this goes against the World Health Organization's sexual rights, right?
Yes.
So we actually have sexual rights as part of human rights, and access to correct sexual education is one of those. Not having punishment for sexuality is another one of those. And then the other one is not allowing people to have their development, right? So this is, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is actually going against sexual rights that are written by the World Health Organization.
I thought they had God speaking for them and had all the right answers on how to do everything.
Well, yes, that's always the answer, right? So yeah.
So
what version of God, right, are we talking about?
That's my biggest thing.
And were you kicked out in the middle of your semester like I was, where you just lost all that tuition money?
Lost all the tuition money, lost all the credits that I was working towards as well. And I was most of the way through the semester.
Right. So that's another punishment that is financial, and and especially, as women, when we're taught that we should really hurry and get our education if we're going to get any of it at all, because our real job is to make babies and get married. That's a huge cost, to lose an entire semester at such a pivotal age, when we're trying desperately to get as much educational credits as we can before we're really encouraged to not just not really be career minded at all. Okay, so then you take a year off and then you come back to BYU. So you graduate from BYU. So it was important enough for you to come back, because I did that as well, which I always wonder, why did I do that? But I did.
I have a lot of people ask me that too. And the more that I've gone back, I just said I had a job I needed to finish. And I said I was going to start it and I was going to finish it. And that was where I was supposed to go. And I didn't want to graduate from Utah Valley University, because I still went to school in that off year. I didn't just sit around. I went to UVU and I said, I'm going to get my freshman year in, took all of the stupid classes that I knew were going to be terrible at BYU, but I just took them at UVU instead, so that those would transfer over. Like my American Heritage final was open book. And I remember everybody talking about how much they hated that class at BYU because it was so hard and they had to be tested on all these stupid things. And I was like, mine was open book. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Right.
So did that, came back to BYU. I was still in the athletic training program. Well, I hadn't gotten into it yet, but then I kind of met my husband, got myself on a wonderful path, went and worked with BYU. I was married. Worked with football team. I was married at the time. So I was like, look, I'm good. I'm married. Like no harm, no foul. Let's move on. Let me just put my work into the football team, which, mind you, being in the behind the scenes of BYU athletics for 2 years will not give you faith in the church, nor the system, nor any bit. There's BYU upper campus, where all of the nice, happy people are. Then there's lower campus that we just don't talk about, and that we usually sweep things under the rug really quick. And it depends on how many people know about things. And that's about the rules that exist down there. That
Yeah.
it's nasty, gross, terrible people that I would love to sit and have a wonderful conversation with the athletic director. But I can't do that because I'm just an angry woman, right? According to them. That's what I'm saying. That's what I look like, because I just look like I'm an angry,
Unforgiving,
yeah.
unforgiving, wanting to just benefit yourself, whatever those things. When we try to challenge the system, there's going to be all these ways that we get discredited officially by discipline or by ostracization, but then all this rumor mill as well, right? Like assuming what your intentions are. Mm-hmm.
So I was married for 5.5 years, and we ended up moving to Georgia just before we got divorced. But when we moved to Georgia is when I found out I was pregnant. And so I was like, oh, little boy, okay, let's go, let's do this. And about a year into his birth, with it, I mean, we started really splitting at the seams when he was probably 6 months old. I was postpartum stuff. My brain just kind of started unwinding a bunch of stuff, and it didn't compute well in the marriage. And at this point, and I got married when I was 20, so I'm 25, 26 at this point, and I'm saying, hey, I can't continue down this path. The rules that I'm following in life are not working. They are not working, and I kind of abandoned any sort of idea of any rules. And I ended up cheating on my husband, and he left me for that reason, ultimately. And I can look back now and say, okay, a lot of marriages ended that way. So in the end, this isn't like groundbreaking news for anybody. So it's fine, but not fine, because I hurt him a lot in doing that. But now I can process it as it was a separation. It needed to happen. And so I got divorced in 2020. I started challenging my faith. I said, the rules that I'm following haven't been working for me. Why have they not been working for me? This is not okay. I need to change something because I hurt someone really bad. And I have a kiddo, and he's not going to grow up in this system. Nope, he's not going to, no. It killed me. It destroyed me. I understand there's some people who have better experiences than me. But as far as my sexual identity and who I was as a woman, that got destroyed from day one. Okay. And kept getting stamped out my entire life. And I did not want that for my child. And I said, you know what? Ultimately, one day he could come to me and say, I want to know about that church, and I'm going to go explore, and I'm going to try and find out all the information about it. And I can't do anything about that, nor do I want to. I want him to explore. I want him to look for all of the answers, because that was something that I was told I wasn't allowed to do either, was if reading the scriptures didn't heal your sexual addiction, then you're not faithful enough. Mm-hmm. Instead of, let's go talk to an actual therapist that can talk to you about your sexual trauma your entire life and help build this picture for you to help you gain the tools that you need in order to understand that there were things that you were wronged in the past. And I mean, I read Oprah Winfrey's book, What Happened to You. I read Brene Brown, Power of Vulnerability. I went down the self-help rabbit hole. And then I realized, or I read Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and that was a big one. I have a cheetah tattoo on my arm for that book because she has the chapter in there called No, and she explains what it's like to feel the spirit, what I had been labeled as feeling the spirit. And I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm supposed to have a monopoly on that, or this church is supposed to have a monopoly on that exact feeling of liquid gold that fills your bones when it tells you something is right. And I said, hold up, hold the phone. I think maybe we have a monopoly or an autonomy on the right ideas. Maybe not. That maybe not. Just kind of the shelf broke and everything started to unwind. And I went and I read the whole CES letter because my sister said she read it, and she's since left the church, but she's still out in Utah, and there's a lot of complicated feelings there anyway. But for the most part, she's left the church, but the rest of my family is still in it. But once I left the church and I had this shelf fall down of these are not the principles I'm supposed to be upholding all the time. I am not supposed to be protecting the image of a church over my own self-image. I am not supposed to be protecting this man because he's a football player and needs a professional career, which, mind you, he's in the NFL now. He's doing great. He's living his own life, whatever. I'm so thankful that he wasn't kicked out like I was, because that could have really affected his professional career for the rest of his life and his ability to support himself.
Just like they affected your professional career. Mm-hmm.
Just like they affected my professional career. And so that's it. And mind you, I can never get a job at BYU for all of these reasons too. So it's not like I could go back and work through the athletic department there, even though the only reason I would have any interest in doing that is to try and be a safe place for anybody there. And that's literally, I have talked to so many athletes that are still there, missionaries, students over there, all this stuff, who are just like, yeah, the only reason we're here is because our parents said this is where we got to go. That's pretty much the vibes over there right now, is this is where I have to be because the boomers are not all dead yet. No offense to the boomers, but literally is kind of where it's at right now. So anyway, sorry. So I leave the church.
Yeah, so you're going through this fate transition, and what are you starting to figure out about your sexuality and your sense of self? I mean, I love this idea that you're kind of honing into how you can have, personal truth and personal authority, and all the books you mentioned, great books.
Right. The books that I have them on repeat. Like I have a whole collection of Brene Brown at this point because she just speaks my language, which her language is very much no bullshittery. She just says, this is the way that I think that things need to go. and I really like the assertiveness that she has in it, because I have a lot of people tell me that I'm confrontational. And I'm like, but if you have good ideas, is it confrontational? It's just the way that I'm coming off, or like what? Like I can fix that, yes. But sometimes I think Brene comes off as like, no, I'm going to tell you that this is how it is, and I'm going to be really assertive, and I'm going to do it as a woman who exists in a field that is, which any medical field is very male dominated. So she's just like, no, I'm here. This is my place. These are my views. And that's very inspiring to me as well, because I've been told, my whole life, your views aren't worth it, or basically, that your views are contradictory to God. Therefore, they're not valid. They're not the ultimate truth, right? So once I figure out I don't have to protect. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's typical to tell women that they're being confrontational or bitchy or, whatever those things are when we become assertive. Not that all people need to watch tone and, be diplomatic enough to get their points across. So I'm not saying we should just be able to.
Sure.
Everybody has to emotionally regulate. At the same time, the research shows that for very similar behaviors, women get, coined as aggressive, confrontational, bitchy, whereas men get coined as aggressive and leaders and assertive and in positive ways. So that's just a reality that's there. Mm-hmm.
So I guess in the end, what I was saying was that once I found out that I didn't have to protect this idea of the church as a perfect thing, because that kind of being raised in the church as a representative, I'm a mission president's daughter, I go to BYU, I'm a I'm trying so hard to be this good Mormon girl because every member a missionary, everyone's an example of the believers. That's something that I was like, I was really trying hard to do that. You know what I mean? But failing along the way, I just thought I was the problem, and anyway, so now I don't have to protect this idea anymore. And I go, what have I been doing? What have I been contributing towards? There's these shirts that ex-Mormons have now that say, I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon. And I go, I'm sorry for my entire Mormon life. Like,
Yeah.
I had 2 years of being really, really mad about the life that I had lived up to age 26, 27.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard.
Yeah, it is hard. It's a huge part of the faith transition process is the grief, the betrayal, the confusion, the anger, the what ifs, all of those things are just so normal. So, well, the reason why, I reached out to you is I don't know, a few weeks ago, or I don't know exactly how long ago it was, but I just ran across a Facebook post of yours, and there you are, like, you're a bodybuilder, so you've got your whole body laid out naked
On
on
the
top of
Cougar,
the BYU
outside of the state.
Cougar, the nice the very bronze, elegant statue. It's a very beautiful picture, right? With the stadium behind you, and you've got you're laying on your back on top of this cougar statue. And I'm like, what is this? And then I'm reading your description, which basically said that, yeah, you had been suspended at BYU. And so here you are years later after, in order, as part of, I think, a healing. I saw this as a healing ritual for you. I don't know if you necessarily see it that way, but
I have a few pictures in mind that I want to do after that one, but this one, so as a bodybuilder, and I think I got into bodybuilding after that life because it was a way to own my body again as mine and to be 100% confident in every single bit of my body and that none of it needs to be covered, but I can choose what I cover and and mind you, bodybuilding, we cover all the good parts. Okay. So, it's not a lot of fabric, but it is enough to cover the good parts. And bodybuilding is really a sport that isn't about looking better or being super skinny. It is about working so hard to reach a goal and doing a neurotic level of things that you don't actually believe in until you see it happen. So I was like, I just spent my whole life doing a bunch of things for a bunch of reasons that I don't actually know. And what I got on the other side was it did not compute. Let's try this one. And then I get to the other side and it all computed. And I was like, what is this? What is this magic where I can work hard for something and things actually come to fruition? And it was just this awesome, empowering thing for me that helped me feel like I was really capable of doing big things. And this was probably my third show that I had done. And I said, you know what? This one I'm doing in Utah. And I had a couple of building friends out there. The one that runs that show out there is a close friend of mine. And so I was like, look, I'm going to go do this show because it's her show. And we're going to, I'm in Utah. My family should come, right? Like they would come to this. Like it's okay for that. My dad was told he couldn't come by my mom because he's not allowed to see bodies like that. And now that I know the background information, I'm like, oh, okay. She's allowed to have whatever rules she wants for that guy at this point. Because that's where her trauma comes from, which I used to think my mom was just really controlling over my dad in that sense and was projecting that he was this not bad person, but that he had faults in his head over this category. I was like, why are you projecting that? That's stupid. Like, he's not looking at his daughters like that. Why do I have to wear something that covers my shoulders in my home? And she said, well, so that your father and your brother don't get bad thoughts. And like, as a kid, I'm like, why are my father and brother getting bad thoughts about me? That shouldn't be a thing. Why do I have to cover myself in my home? But my mom has this thing in the back of her head is I need to protect the women that are in this home because I have information in my head that my kids don't have. And I'm trying to protect this environment. And so I'm going to put these ideas out there that maybe look a little bit weird, but they're going to protect them in the end.
And all I'll say about that, although I agree with you that your mom has a right to do whatever rules she needs, this is another systemic problem we have, is that we think that by stamping down sexuality, that will help
That will fix
of,
anything.
of either perpetrative or criminal or inappropriate sexual behavior. And that actually, I think, makes it worse.
I agreed, 100% agreed, because every single person I've talked to since I've left that has told me about their experience says it ruined me. It made me think that it made me think I was a sexual predator at times because I felt like I couldn't control it. Because that's another thing too, is if you never learn self-control in a certain area of your life, you can't, it's a practice. It is a practice. Understanding your sexuality and your boundaries and what's right and what's wrong is a practice. Sometimes you can do a lot in your head to process things. There's a lot of times where you're just going to make mistakes out in the world and you're going to figure out where you fit. And either your mistakes are so great that your brain needs some help, or you figure it out and you understand your boundaries like every other human since the dawn of time.
Yeah, no, it's this is a lot bigger than the Mormon Church. This is systemic work that we
Yes.
need to do in this country at so many levels and other countries, right? I mean, we're not by any means
Right.
the only
It just
people.
happens to exist in a disgusting level in the Mormon church. That's the part that that gets me fired up sometimes where I'm like, let's
Right.
go. Because I'm like, look, this isn't okay. My nieces and nephews are in that system right now. My family's still in that system. And I'm the one who's being told I have the bad ideas over this. And I'm over here like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna pull my hair out because I'm like, I know that's not the way. Do I know the way? Do I have all the answers? No. And I don't think anybody does. And I think that's the hardest thing here, is because I think sexuality and sexual identity is such a individual problem. You can't slap the same answers on everybody. And that's the whole point, is that our church says, here's these answers for everybody. And then if you don't fit in that box, you're done.
Yeah.
And so the people that fit in the box don't understand the people that don't fit in the box. And I fit in the box enough because now, since exploring a lot of things, I found out that I'm bisexual. And I remember I used to have dreams as a kid where I would kiss a girl and I would wake up and I'd be like, oh my gosh, why did I do that in my dream? You know what I mean? Like, I felt bad about it because I also had those same feelings for guys. So it's like, well, that's the one I need to entertain. That's the thought to entertain. That's, the other one is that's a sin. That's something the devil put in my head. Literally is kind of how I thought. It was like, oh, that's just a a negative thing sent to me by the adversary. And that's another thing too, is this church allows us to offload the bad things we do off onto another person, the devil. Well, he made me do it. The devil made me do it. I'm a good person. I succumbed to the influence of something else, when actually sometimes it's just who you are, and that exists in here. And we are not perfect people. So like Brene says, we all have shitty first drafts, okay? SFDs. And a lot of those thoughts are shitty first drafts. And a lot of thoughts shouldn't come out of our mouths and shouldn't be taken action upon with our hands either. There's a lot of those that go through our brains, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, because we then have a processing system that says, is this appropriate or is this not appropriate? And if we haven't had the proper mechanisms to teach us what is appropriate and what is not, and the proper guidance and education, like you're talking about, and ability to explore your sexual identity and not being shamed for the things that you do, then you turn into a happy, healthy sexual individual. That is so not what is going on in the church, and what is ruining the children there. And you put them into BYU where it's just as bad, or you send them on missions where it's even worse because they can't do anything. Like, you just are taking these children's minds and trying to destroy them so much that they will conform to a system that they will stay with till the day that they die, and end up not talking to their children because their children found out that their whole life was BS. And now we're in this situation where I'm looking at my dad, who just was a perfect example of what falling to the system looks like. And I am trying to not blame him for that. But at the same time, I'm like, no, a 35-year-old should never ever touch a 14, 15-year-old girl. That is the just blanket statement. And my dad can't say that that is something that he needs fixed in his head. I can't take part to a family system or a church or anything that supports hiding that stuff and gets it in your head that even your daughter can be shit on by the school that you believe the church supports and is everything good. Like, just the amount of poison that has to exist in your head to get you to this point is really, really hard for me to justify, but also I've spent a good deal of time trying to understand it because I care about my family.
Yeah. Well, and you're bringing up so many things. I mean, a while ago, I was wanting to say, you know, I think people will choose a false thing that feels secure versus dealing with the ambiguity that you're mentioning, that sometimes we don't have all the answers of how to have these solutions. But so even if that's not the answer because it feels secure, people will choose it, right? And so instead of coming out here where we have to deal with the ambiguities and the questions and the curiosity to actually find the real solutions. And then with what you're saying about, you know, I mean, our whole culture in this church, which is another thing that the church tries to sweep under the rug, is that it did start with a leader who did touch 14 and 15-year-olds. And the classic, you know, excuse for that is, well, it was a different time. And then yeah, 14 and 15-year-olds, you know, would even get married. And really, when you look at the statistics, even back in the 1800s, that's not true. That's not a true statement. So they still
also say that the reason that we were pushed across the country, the only words we're given as kids is religious persecution. Those are the exact words we're given, not the fact that we were practicing polygamy and it was illegal at the time and the government legitimately was trying to stop this practice because the people.
Sometimes when you're persecuted, you might want to ask, why are we being persecuted? Why is the rest of society upset with us? Why are there issues here that the rest of the world is not okay with, right? So that might be a good self-awareness practice to start. Anyway, I know we're almost out of time, so I want to get back to this decision that you made to do this photography. So tell me more about that process, what that meant for you, and kind of what it symbolizes as far as your identity now.
So that picture's outside the BYU football stadium. So obviously BYU football has a lot to do with my history and my past. And it's been in it, like I've watched it since the moment I was born. I learned to love it. My dad told me those were the people that I wanted to be with because like he put a picture of a football player on my wall as a kid as a joke to be like, look, this is your future husband. Like he printed it out and put it on my wall kind of thing. You know, and so this whole life is just fueling this idea that this image of this church is perfect and amazing and wonderful. And look how awesome and everything this is. So I'm like, cool, picture's worth 1,000 words. I have a really awesome lean body right now. I just got tanned by my cousin that happens to be in Pleasant Grove or no, somewhere Springville down that way anyway. And I'm going back up to Harriman where my sister lives. And I'm like, guess what's on the way? So I say, can we swing by campus really quick? She goes, why? And I go, I mean, I've had this idea for a picture for a really long time and just trust me. And she's like, okay, all right. And then I'm starting to explain it to her on the way over. And this is my other sister who's read the CES letter. So she and I for a really long time, we're kind of rolling with each other. Long story, we're not there right now. But anyway, we were very much in this camaraderie, F the church mind frame. Okay. And it felt really good. Honestly, it felt very cathartic. So we go over to the school and I'm parked across the way. And looking around, luckily there was only like two like older women that were kind of down the way. So I think maybe they saw me naked, but I'm not sure. I think for the most part, nobody was harmed in the making of this picture. But I run behind this cougar and I go, Jesse, you get like 3 shots and I'm throwing my clothes back on and we're getting out of here. Because if someone sees us, they're going to call the cops immediately. This is just not even like at that school, you're going to get tattled on like it's nobody's business. So I run over, I take all my stuff off. I'm still dripping in tan a little bit, so I'm slipping off of this Cougar. But I finally get a position. I'm like, okay, did you get it? And it was freezing cold because it was April in Utah. And so luckily there was no snow though, and the lighting was perfect. It was nighttime. And oh, I was just like, thank you, Apple camera, for catching all the light you can. Because it was just an iPhone picture really quick. And then I throw my clothes back on, we race back in the car and we get out of there. And I post that picture that night saying I never got my graduation picture. And my mom the next day, the day of my bodybuilding show, where mind you, my cortisol levels are through the roof because I have no body fat. I'm living on next to no food. I'm pretty much surviving on adrenaline and a prayer and some rice cakes. Okay. So that's where my patience level is at. And she calls me and talks about how disappointed she was in me and this image that of the school that I'm trying to ruin and all of this. And why am I so, anyway, so
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
didn't end up coming. Yeah. There was,
You're not complying with the system. You're not showing the world all the shiny, happy faces. Happy, happy, happy.
was in tears over me taking this picture. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll see you later. I've got a show I got to do. Like, because that's kind of what you do at that point. It seems very callous, but any single competitor,
I think it's
is like, I can't process this right now. Like, yeah.
It's so interesting that the tears that seem to matter are only the tears on the Latter-day Saints side. What about all the tears that are being shed on the other side? Why is that not equally valid, right? And there's just zero ability to hold space for that, right? So then there's this expectation that even though we've been hurt, we still need to respect the abuser. And the sadness and disappointment when we actually say, hey, by the way, this thing abused me. Oh, now we're very sad and disappointed that you're sharing that with the world. Well, guess what? I'm very sad and disappointed that I was abused.
That part. So, I'm not coming out here and saying my dad sexually abused me my entire life and he touched me and all this stuff. No, that is exactly the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying there are other ways besides that direct abuse that is the only one that you seem to think is valid on any occasion. But even still, I question for my dad, I question his ability to find right and wrong on that, right? But you're giving me the rules on how to do that, and it's destroying me, and I can't say anything about it. And if I say something about it, I'm not faithful enough, or I'm a problem, or I'm angry, or I just want to sin. That's my favorite one. Oh, well, she thinks all these things because she wants to sin.
Yeah, they see it. Yeah, I think they see it as a form of disrespect. And the problem is that this disrespect happened years ago, and to not be able to talk about
or me being on top of the Cougar, but she didn't have tears, the same kind of tears that I wanted for me when I was kicked out of school.
Right.
Because the tears for her there were tears over the loss of my soul.
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to think my soul was lost because of a mistake I made. But that was the message I got from my parents every time her soul is compromised. Her eternal salvation is currently compromised. Yeah. We need to fix this. We need to get involved and we need to fix this because she can't do it herself. That was another thing too. It took away from me thinking that I had the ability to solve things in my own head. I always had to go to someone else to try and solve that problem because that's what I was told I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So then learning critical thinking skills and all of those things after leaving the church was a very difficult process.
Super challenging. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's an invitation I would just ask if anybody's listening and kind of more on the side of the church on things is just all those feelings you might have, right? Like even these two women talking about this is so wrong or disrespectful. Imagine that maybe on the other side, we would have those same types of feelings, right? And for similar reasons, but on the other side of respect and desecration and, all these things that get thrown on us. I would just hope that that's at least an invitation. Okay, so last question, I guess, is How would you like to describe yourself now in regards to, you did a great job describing yourself as, kind of indoctrinated in the church and how you saw your sexuality and seeing, even internalizing that idea that you were a sexual addict. I mean, that's so harmful on so many levels. I can't even stand it. I almost start getting nauseous when people tell me these stories. But how do you identify now? What are you finding out about yourself? I mean, I think it's an ongoing journey, right? The idea of sexual exploration and development, but where are you today?
A lot of that exploration started when I got divorced because I kind of thought to myself, okay, now I have the chance to, in lack of a better way of describing it, but live my early 20s and teens and figure that out for myself. But the thing is, I was doing this with a kid and an ex-husband and a life that I'm trying to live, and now I have to support myself and all this stuff. So it has been a long process because you kind of only have so much mental space for one thing at a time. And for a long time, it was, okay, my church isn't true. How do I get up every day? That was the first steps, not what does my entire sexual, identity look like. That was a lot later when I was able to think past get up, put clothes on, get to the next thing. And like that's how hard it is sometimes for people to lose their complete identity in religion, is that you have to start from scratch a little bit. And it's hard to do as an adult. It's much harder to do as an adult than it is to do when you're just developing as a child and you have a parent that you can go to and ask questions.
Yeah,
Sorry. But like
yeah, no, I
really
agree.
what it is,
A
you
lot of
know.
people don't understand, even a lot of therapists don't understand the impact of a faith transition, especially for those who come from fundamental or strict or conservative religions. Not all religion is the same, and there are religions that are much more allowing of exploration and self-development. But when you come from fundamental and conservative and high demand religions, it's the cost of stepping away from that is profound. So yes.
So I actually started with the book The Ethical Slut, which I don't know if you've read that one, but it's one of my favorites
Oh yeah.
because I thought, okay, that title alone grabs me because I feel like I'm an ethical being, but I also feel like there's a side of me that's very sexually curious and has to figure things out and maybe doesn't even roll with the normative, I guess, sexual identity. That there's still a large population that's straight. There's still a large population that says, I want to live with one person for the rest of my life and have kids. And that has nothing to do with their religion. It has everything to do, I think, with evolution and continuing a species. And I also think we're at a point in time where continuing the species is not a necessary part of evolution. Therefore, science and nature will diversify itself and create whatever it wants to. Really, once the species is there, it's going to say, okay, where's beauty and magic, and that's humanity that I see right now. And along this process, if, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I found out I was bisexual because I said, you know what, and even more than that, I more so identify with pansexual, meaning that and for people who don't really understand that, is I don't really care how you were born. Where are you now? Who are you? Who do you present to me as? That's who you are. I don't need to say, oh, well, you have certain parts, therefore you are A or B. That's not my choice. This is your body, your life. You tell me what you are, kind of thing, instead of me making any sort of assumption there. So that was a big change and a hard place to get to, but I try and give people what I wish they would give me, which is the chance to explain, the chance to say, okay, well, yes, I like girls, but that doesn't mean that I don't like boys. And yes, I have a child, so I am capable of pushing a child out into the world, but that also doesn't mean that my role is mother, like I hate being a mom. Okay, I'll just say that out loud. I hate it. It is so hard. And he's 4 and he withholds poop right now. And it's the biggest problem in my life. Okay. But I love this kid. So I will sit there and hug him while he poops on the toilet because it's hard. Okay. So that's the kind of person I'm like, look, I made this decision. He's my child, but I don't have to have this identity as mother that is holding on to me or preventing me from doing anything else, from continuing bodybuilding, from trying to take over the world in whatever way I possibly can in my own little corner, and to try and make change towards getting away from these nasty ex-Mormon, this dumpster fire that exists. That's really, really, it's honey covered bullshit is what they deliver. And So that's why I'm like, guys, you're doing a really good job of making it look good. But I'm going to show you the part where it's real, because that's how we fix things. And if I exist in society to piss people off because I'm saying things that may or may not cause change, cool. Welcome to my life. This is the role I've accepted, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with being strong enough to say I'm pansexual. I'm polyamorous. I don't like just being in a marriage with one person. No, that makes me feel like I want to vomit and like I'm suffocated for the rest of my life. It's the same feeling if I tried to tell my father, you have to have sex with a man for the rest of your life. Like, he would just, his mind would explode and he would be like, no, ew, what? Why would you force me to do that sort of, and he would lose his mind, right? But I can't say that this is what makes me happy, even though what makes you happy is being with my mom, miserable or not, till the day you die, but endure till the end. That's what you chose. Okay. You get to choose that, right? So you got to let me choose it too. But his identity is based on whether or not he raises good kids. Because that was a lot of the teachings back then in the church, was raise good kids, raise good kids, raise good kids. And I didn't even know that because I didn't grow up in that world. But the more I hear it from people who were in the generation that they're in, is your role was mother and father and household and stability. And if you couldn't control that, it was the parents' fault, right? And so that's what I'm saying, is that's what I grew up in. But now I'm in a place where I can say, no, 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 I'm an individual. We can have an adult relationship, but that involves real boundaries, and it involves honesty and vulnerability. And those are things that my family's not willing to offer me anymore. And so it's really, that's the ultimate sad part, is that we're both trying to live our lives to the fullest, but we can't do it together because we don't believe in the same God or whatever. Like, that it doesn't make sense to me anymore. It's the same thing. It's the same thing to me, and this may sound extreme to other people, as Palestinians and Israelis killing each other. It is for an old fight. And if the answer is ostracism or murder or pain or shame, it's not the right answer. And I wish that that message could get across, like you said, to the other side, that we're trying to understand them so hard. And they don't want to understand us because it creates cognitive dissonance in their head that they can't hold in their soul. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, as
Yeah.
long
I mean, I've always found it extremely tragic that families and communities, like you're saying, at large, can get so attached to their identity and their beliefs, especially religious beliefs, that that then there's no room for actual relationship, right?
yeah.
Which I think in most of the world religions, there is an importance placed on relationship, but then we lose sight of that because of these more rigid ideas of how to conform to the religious belief.
And being raised in a place where the idea of eternal families is so, like, they talk about family more than anything. And if you are somebody who is because I'm not saying I'm a failure in life, but I am a failure to that family system that my dad created, and dad and mom, and that the whole environment created. I am a failure to this system. Yes, I don't fit in there. I don't belong there. I don't want to belong there. Okay. But that's still a hard thing to deal with, because your entire life you want to be with your family forever. You want to be in the next life with your family, and that's the whole reason why you're following this crazy set of rules in this life, is eternal families. Not because you want a really big house in the next life. Like, no, we don't actually talk about that. We talk about, I mean, we kind of do, but we talk about blessings, and the biggest one being that we get to be with our family. So then you're telling me that if I don't do exactly all of these things, that I can't even have any sort of relationship or happiness with this family in this life. For me, those, it's just the doctrines don't line up. You know what I mean? Like, there's a disconnect in there, where if family really is everything, why aren't you doing just as much to try and figure these things out too?
Yeah, right.
Why is there not, why do I always have to cover up when I go into your home? And I mean literally, put something over my shoulders because you can't look at me as a whole individual because my shoulders are showing, or because you need me to conform to a system that you have in place and you want to know that I can come into your home and follow your rules. So that's something I can't even do anymore because of the level of control that exists in that family, that if you are there and you're following their rules, then you're okay with the way that they've handled things. And I'm not okay with the way that my family has handled any sort of the sexual trauma that has existed in my life, my siblings' lives, my cousins' lives, my aunts and uncles' lives. The more that I talk to my family, the more that I realize that this has been going on since the dawn of time, okay? And that it is actually a family sickness that, because of the lack of accountability, has created sexual predators. And I know that because my brain was taught all the same things. And so I got to a point where I said, that gives me an excuse to do something wrong and be okay with it. Why is that the principle that my family's following? And why does that cause something bad in here? Where's the shame coming from, really? Is it because I don't know how to accept myself, or is it because I am a sexually troubled child who needs to be fixed? Like, where are these feelings actually coming from? And so going back in my life, maybe at the time I didn't see those things as that way, but I can go back and look and say, whoa, 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 hold the phone. And I don't want that for my child. How do I fix, shift, and change so that my kid doesn't ever have some of the shitty first drafts that went into my head based on the teachings that I was given as a kid? I've had my own thoughts where I've had to say, that's not okay. And having that level of honesty with yourself to say, that was a thought to harm someone else. Back off. That's something that is not taught in the Mormon churches, how to know when to back off, when to come back, when to reevaluate, when to say maybe that thought wasn't perfect or good or whatever. Or it does the opposite. It makes it so that you question everything that you say and you can't believe anything about yourself. And it's a mind fuck. And there's no right answer when you grow up in that environment. So I said, okay, cool, we're out. I'm done.
Yeah, right.
And mind you, I'm the happiest, most free, it's hard because I come on here and I talk about all the hard things,
Yeah.
but I do body work for professional bodybuilders. I do sports massage on them. I get to explore having a partner and exploring other relationships at the same time, and having that be an asset to my relationship with this partner too. That's a whole other thing, that there are some people who enjoy the sharing aspect. And there's a lot of people's brains who can't even compute that. And I say, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. And you don't have to like the same things that I do, but I get to explore this side of me. I get to try new things. I get to, and I get to do it as an adult, which I think I have a few more, like my prefrontal cortex is a little bit more developed. So I'm not quite making as many stupid, reckless decisions, but I'm still exploring. And I plan on doing that for the rest of my life. Like, that's the beauty of my future, is that the person that I am now is a completely different person than 3 years ago, is a completely different person than 20 years ago. But I hope that that's the same thing in 20 years from now. I hope I look back on me and go, wow, that child knew nothing, and that's I think what life is about. Not, hey, here's all the answers. You get them all about age 20 and then endure to the end.
Right, right. Yeah, that's kind of boring when you think about it. I like the model of ongoing development, ongoing growth, ongoing value development. What are my values? What are my beliefs? Those are supposed to be shifting and developing over the lifespan. So, and we don't make a lot of room for that in Mormon land, sadly. So let's see. Jesse Smith Cook says, love you, Kelly. So that's a shout out for you. I'd like for you to share, how can people find you? You're talking about kind of your work. So take a minute to, market yourself and let people know. Do you have an Instagram account or social media or whatever that people can follow if they're interested?
And the one that I mainly use for my ex-Mormon life is the Kelly Marie Fit Mom. That's kind of where I go, and I post that's where I process a lot of trauma on there. So sometimes I post things that people are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but like this is a daily thing where sometimes I wake up and I say, man, F the Mormon church today. I can't deal with this nonsense. Let me go post something with a quote that made me feel good." Okay. Because there's a lot of people who wake up that way one day and they have the same thoughts. And I get told a lot of times that those things that I post helped them that day. And I'm like, okay, if I'm helping one person on the planet, I don't care. I literally don't care if my family's pissed at me till the day I die, because it kind of, I'm like, look, I'm helping people who are in the situation that I was in to get out of that place, not to stay there. That's a painful place. That's really hard. That's not fun. It's necessary. And so sometimes I say, you know what? It looks like you have a hard path ahead of you. It looks like you might have to go through some stuff and face some really hard things. I've had a lot of people who I say, well, do you even want to be married to that person? Because they tell me all of these things about how everything in their life is wrong. And I'm like, does she know these things? Like, why are you telling me this? But at the same time, I'm like, this life is not meant for that nonsense. It's meant for moving forward. And it's really hard to process all of that trauma and get into a place where you're looking at the light. But my sports medicine Kelly page is kind of where I'm looking more so at the light. And my my services mainly involve body work here. So I do sports massage, it's hands-on work, but I also do coaching online where I provide fitness programs to people, nutrition programs to people, and I send it, I just send it to them all online. And then we can sometimes do like I've done it before where I do FaceTime sessions with people in the gym if there's particular things that aren't clicking. I do a lot of that because I think that owning your body is a big part of the post-Mormon journey too, and anybody's healing journey is understanding how to accept who you are and that you're okay and that there isn't some sort of image that you're supposed to be. That's a very difficult thing. And honestly, I've dealt with a lot of ex-Mormons in their physical fitness journey because they're like, hey, this is the first time I've wanted to wear a tank top and my shoulders don't look like I want them to look. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's get you confident in that tank top. Let's go. Because that sounds fun to me. And I know exactly what that feels like. And that is a driving force because you spent the first quarter of your life not doing that. Let's get you into a place where you feel comfortable doing that. Because that's something they want, and so I'm very perceptive in listening to people and what their wants and needs are. Not everybody wants to be a bodybuilder. In fact, it's a very small part of the population because we're a little bit crazy. But I also tell people that bodybuilders are people who are very good at processing trauma because we just take it all and bundle it up and go take it out on some weights. And it's cheaper than you, Natasha, per hour. So we use that to our advantage, and then we try and share a little bit of that with the world. But the reason that we shine on those stages isn't necessarily because of the food we ate or the weights we lifted. It's because we achieved something that almost killed us, but didn't. And then we were able to go and present that hard work. And so that's kind of my goal for the future is okay, leaving the church didn't kill me, but it almost did. Because
No.
there's many times, and I know there's a lot of people who've been like, okay, if that's not true, life's not worth living. Because in your head, that's your only idea of truth. So once that's gone and you have nothing, it's so disorienting that for a second you're like, what? This wasn't worth it. But you have to get to the point of figuring out you are worth it, and what your wants and needs and the things that exist in here are more worth anything on the planet, any other person, any idea, any image, any religion, anything. Are you okay in here? That's all I care about. And so that's something that I hope to share and push more out there, and to show that it's not always pretty, because my Kelly Marie Fit Mom page looks like a very angry ex-Mormon sometimes. Which I am at times. I am, but I also
Part of the process. Anger is part of the process. It's part of the healing process and the trauma response process. So
I'm a safe place for that anger too. And so sometimes people just message me and say, man, I'm really pissed about your story, or because I had this similar thing and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, be pissed. Be pissed today. Now, let's not take it out on anybody, but we can feel our feelings today, and that's okay. And also to give, because at first they're like, well, was I wrong? And I go, whoa, no. What's your experience? Don't stop looking for answers outside, look more in here. What does in here tell you? Is this okay? This is all that matters. And, you know, maybe some accountability and some self-awareness. Yes. But like, it's things that the Mormon church is lacking, you know, is kind of that category. It doesn't have a whole lot. And that's something I think that you've kind of built yourself up on too, is, hey, this category in the church, sexual identity and trauma and all this stuff, help.
Right.
Anybody
Yeah.
can we see this problem? This is a big problem. Because, you know, sometimes people are like, well, you live out in Georgia. Why do you care about something that happens in Utah? And I go, because those are my people. That's my community where I came from. That's
Well, and this is everywhere.
and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Talk about it as a bigger systemic problem than it is really, but like it just happens to be very prevalent in the ex-Mormon community, all of these things because, Mormon community, I should say, because I think the ex-Mormons are trying to fix those things. So we hope the same problems don't exist in those communities. We hope they're just things that we're recognizing that, you know, I guess it starts with that, but holy hell, sometimes it feels like you're pulling hairs just to tell somebody that it's not okay to touch someone else that way. You know what I mean? And you're like, this is a basic concept, but I have to tell you this. And you're a 35, 40, 50-year-old man. And it's okay to like, stupid concept I heard one time in church is never be alone in a room with a woman because that immediately will cause, like, that poor man who's saying those things, that he can't even control himself to the point where he's going to be alone in a room with someone. Like, these people aren't safe people in society if these are the lessons we're teaching.
Right. I totally agree. All right, Kelly, our time is definitely up. I thank you so much for spending this time with us today and sharing your story. I think it's a very common story. I think there's aspects of it, whether it's, you know, whether things have been done to you or whether things have been done to those around you or whether it's just a systemic issue. And you've really highlighted a lot of these issues so well. So thank you so much for being on the show. For those who are listening, I definitely want to say, you know, this podcast needs donations. So if you want to support the podcast, please go to natashahelfer.com. And there's a donate button at the bottom of the page. So please, you know, anything you can offer is great. And I also just want to say that we do have some groups coming up in January that deal with some of these things that Kelly's been talking about. We have religious trauma, we have reclaiming female sexuality, we have combating male sexual shame, which is, I think, a big reason why a lot of times men can't express or, you know, talk about their sexuality, especially if they've been through like a sexual addiction program, kind of like Kelly was describing, which is how we usually treat men in the church, is like sexual addicts, and then women get treated that way too. And we have an ethical non-monogamy group coming up as well, because just like Kelly is expressing exploration, so many people do that post-faith transition, but there's not necessarily a lot of resources or support for those who want to enter a lifestyle that is quite, you know, still taboo in our country. And anytime anything's taboo, people will, you know, kind of try to discredit you or malalign you. And so I think people really do need support to do those kinds of things well. So check all of that out at natashahelfer.com. And again, Kelly, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The intro and outro music for these episodes are by Otter Creek.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Na tishki say the so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. calls alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Naughtisch geschieht so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Naughtisch geschieht so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart.